Look at what we're gonna be doing today. Okay, a look forward at the agenda. So what are we going to do today? We're going to start as we always do with just a very brief recap of what we did last month. And then we're going to go right into some decision making and some action areas moving forward, including looking at our tradable cluster areas, our pathways to connecting to quality jobs, and our inclusionary strategies, which are some of the items that you heard from our sub-regional conveners at our May meeting as well. And then we'll go ahead and close from there. And when we think about our meeting goals as they relate to this agenda, they are on the next slide. All right, so today, as we look at these three main actionable areas, we're going to have a presentation and then allow you to guide the selection of the tradable clusters for further research and action. We're going to use the data and the sub-regional findings to select clusters that support available quality jobs for workforce development analysis. And then finally, we're going to also use the sub-regional findings and data to determine our inclusionary strategies. So there will be a fair amount of presentation today, but at the end of each one of these sub-presentations is a vote and a discussion and a look to moving these items forward. So we're getting to that stage in this planning phase that we're all in to really starting to build concrete strategies. And so Isa, I'm going to turn it over to Isa here in a minute to talk about kind of where we are in that process and why it's really important that we're making these decisions. But that is really going to be the focus of today's meeting. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Isa.
Thanks, Evan. And good afternoon, everybody. Good to be with you all on Zoom today. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Next slide. One more slide forward to our May meeting minutes. All right, thank you very much. So hi, everybody. Our first action item of the day is going to be to approve our May meeting minutes. There is going to be a slight change to how we conduct our voting during virtual meetings, which I'll explain here now. So instead of raising our virtual hands, which is what we usually do, I'm going to be calling out each of these 4 possible vote choices one at a time, and then ask you to type your vote in the chat when your vote option is called. So to illustrate, I'm going to start out by asking if anyone opposes the decision. If you oppose, you will type the word oppose into the chat. And per our bylaws, we'll also give you the opportunity to come off mute and verbally express any concerns that you have. Then I'll move on to the second voting option, which is can live with. So I'll ask if there are any members who can live with the decision, meaning you can accept a yes decision, but don't necessarily have strong feelings one way or the other. If that's your vote, you'll type can live with into the chat, and so on through the support option and the abstain option. If we have any leadership council members on who are unable to access the chat for any reason, you can also unmute and state your name and your vote at the appropriate time. And this new system is really just to make it a little bit easier to record this portion of our meeting and capture everybody's votes. So since this is a new system of voting, before I move on to approving the May minutes, I want to pause and just check to see if any of our leadership council members have any questions on that system. And I'm not seeing the chat window right now, so I would ask one of my Valley Vision or CSS colleagues to let me know if there are any questions in the chat. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward this action item to approve our May meeting minutes. So does anybody oppose the approval of our May meeting minutes? If you oppose, please type oppose in the chat. Okay. Next, who can live with approving our May meeting minutes, meaning that you accept a yes decision but don't have strong feelings one way or the other. If can live with is your vote, please type can live with in the chat. I'll pause just to give folks time. Okay, next, who here supports the approval of the May meeting minutes? If you support the approval of the May meeting minutes, please type support into the chat now. Seeing a few of these come in, so I'm going to pause and give everyone time to type. Okay, thank you. And finally, does anybody abstain? So if you abstain from this vote, please type abstain in the chat, as well as your reason for abstaining if you're able, for example, that you weren't present at the May meeting. Again, I'll pause and give everybody a chance to type those out. Okay. We have folks on our VV and CSS team capturing all this voting in the chat, but just taking a quick glance, it looks like that we have, in fact, based on these results, we have approved our May meeting minutes. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that new way that we are moving action items forward now. All right, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so I want to start by sharing some important timeline updates that we just received from the state earlier this week. So first, as a reminder, the target release date of our Regional Catalyst Fund RFP is happening in October. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide. And then in terms of some new information we got from the state on timing around the implementation fund, we just received word that the implementation fund draft SFP is going to be released in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Public comment for that draft SFP is going to be open from July 2nd all the way up to July 22nd or 23rd. And then the intention of the state is to open the applications for implementation funding from beginning September 10, and those applications will be due November 1st. This is really all the information that we have right now on these dates. And as always, caveat with these timeline is that they may be subject to change. But we'll keep you all posted on that as we get more information. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Alrighty, so let's dive into the good stuff. So these next 3 slides are going to briefly provide some context for the action items that are the core focus of today's Leadership Council meeting. So first, on this slide right here, I want to preview some upcoming Leadership Council activities over the next few months. So you're familiar, you've all seen this chart before. So in July, we're going to be using the inclusionary strategies determined today to inform and introduce to the Leadership Council our draft equity framework in July. In August, we're going to be finalizing and approving that equity framework, and we're also going to use that time to introduce our project selection criteria for the Catalyst Fund RFP. I'll also note, you see it right there in red, that August is also when our regional plan is due to the state. In September, we're going to finalize our project selection criteria and present results from the additional research and analysis around cluster selection and inclusionary strategies. And finally, in October, we're going to finalize our priority cluster selection and release the Catalyst Fund RFP. And again, this timeline is just to give you an idea of how the decisions we make today are going to fit in with our activities as we move forward through the summer. Next slide, please. I also want to take just a couple of minutes to remind us, using this funnel that we've shared with you before, how all these different activities fit together and will eventually lead us to an economic development strategy for our region. So leading up to today, you've had the chance to hear from Cities GPS and deep dive into the research, which has led us to identify industry sectors, better understand our geographic region, and start considering some of the cost barriers that exist for people across all our 8 counties. So this process I just described is reflected in those the two top widest layers of our funnel. Then last month at our May Leadership Council meeting, we heard directly from our community partners. Through their insights, we were able to gain a deeper understanding of the barriers and challenges that our communities face, as well as opportunities for potential projects, and the quality jobs that currently exist in their subregions. So that's reflected by that third purple colored tier where you see community voice. That brings us all to today, that tip of the funnel at the very end. Today, we are moving forward with strategy recommendations that will bring us closer to developing an equity framework and preparing for project selection criteria that we're going to begin developing for our Catalyst Fund RFP. Next slide, please. So what does that all look like for today specifically? Well, at this meeting, we are bringing you 3 key decision areas, which you see in the slide in front of you. The first key decision area is around tradable clusters. Preliminarily identifying tradable clusters is going to guide our work moving forward with our partners at Cities GPS to dive deeper into our major industry sectors and explore specific clusters. This is in direct response to feedback we've received from previous Leadership Council meetings, emphasizing the need for deeper analysis before making any kind of industry decision. Information is going to be gathered through a variety of different methods, including interviews with industry leaders and further data analysis to help us better understand and select industry pathways. The second key decision area is around available quality jobs. So our community partners have stressed the importance of developing pathways for residents in disadvantaged communities. We recognize that quality jobs in tradable industries are going to take a little bit of time to develop. So we're seeking approval from this council to conduct further analysis on current available jobs as well. And finally, that third key decision area, inclusionary strategies. Feedback from our community partners and subregions has also highlighted the need to address barriers to equitable opportunities for disadvantaged communities. So we're aiming to create an equity framework that allows for a more equitable model of quality job attainment. The inclusionary strategies that we are advancing today will support the creation of that framework. Next slide, please. And with that, I am turning it back over to Evan to walk us through that first key decision area.
Great, thanks, Isa. And I'm going to talk us through our tradable cluster areas, which you all have seen presentations where we've identified these. We've had a lot of opportunities to discuss as a group different considerations around these cluster areas. And now today we want to advance some key strategies for further research and action. So let's go to the next slide, please. So, like I said, we want to proceed with further research and analysis to identify specific areas of our industry sectors for us to continue to work through as we're doing strategy building. And just to talk for a minute about how we got to where we are, and we have some of our Brookings and Cities GPS partners here on the line with us today. But as you all remember, there was a really extensive economic analysis that was conducted by Brookings. They surfaced these 4 high potential industry areas for us. Each of these industry areas has a whole large constellation of sub-clusters underneath them to that really support the ecosystem of the industry sector area. So business services, for example, has a whole host of clusters underneath it that support that area of industry sector. So that's one piece, a big piece of what brought us to the sectors that we're talking to, the cluster areas that we're talking about here. I also want to note there was an analysis of existing economic strategy and work in the region, as well as community engagement to guide where there's high potential jobs and where there's opportunities to link into these and other potential areas. So our job now is to really put these pieces together and to start to develop concrete strategy to move forward into further research and further action across these different sector areas. So let's see, let's go to the next. So we're going to talk in more detail about each one of these cluster areas. And let's start doing that by going to the next slide. We go to the next slide. Are we ready for that? Okay, well, while we're waiting for that, I will explain this chart that you're seeing here, right here. So I already mentioned business services. You also see underneath that research and development, where we've highlighted agriculture and food technology, as well as biotech, precision manufacturing, working lands, and then other cluster areas that have been of note. So we're going to talk through the details of all of that. And one of the things, or the thing that we're asking you to vote on today, is to do further research and analysis for each one of these industry cluster areas. And so some examples of the type of work that will be done there is looking at an occupational overlap within these subclusters, looking at different aspects of subcluster strength and occupational areas and opportunities. And then finally, really zeroing in on opportunity jobs. So that means high quality jobs plus promising jobs by skill range, really utilizing industry interviews. So the next piece of this research really has to do with a deeper dive on the data, but also a on-the-ground vetting with industry partners who are, and with employers who are able to really characterize what are some of the main issues going on across these industry areas. So next slide. All right, I'm going to go through each of the industry sector areas and highlight the clusters that we recommend for additional research and analysis. And these slides will show the total number of jobs by industry sector, such as business services, which you see right here. And where available, it will also note the subcluster areas. So please note that the figures here represent existing jobs today, not our future projections. We'll also identify where our sub-regional partners have noted existing business interests and where Leadership Council has discussed these areas at our last meeting on May 16th. So keep in mind that part of our analysis is based on these meeting notes, and some of the comments may have been missed, and if so, please note that in the chat. So for example, here we are identifying business services and business administration. So you can see business services, this is one of our high priority tradable cluster areas. The two sub areas below it are technical services and business administration. And you can see the total number of jobs, the total number of quality jobs that exist right now, the total number of mid-skill jobs, and then our last two columns are really looking at how these have been identified across subregions and at our May 16th meeting. And when we're talking about business services, including this technical services and business administration, it's really looking at the ways that, or the strengths that our region has around these professional services type professions. A lot of this comes from the experience we have in government, spin out of professional services that have come from that. It includes things like information technology and other things. And I think we have a couple of examples of our key companies that exist on the next slide. Yeah, so to give you an idea of what this cluster may include, we've highlighted Zenify here, which provides financial services advisory, and Nitrogen Wealth, which offers wealth management software services. So of course, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I wanted to give you just a couple of examples so you could understand the type of businesses and what might go into this sector that we're recommending moving forward. So next slide, please. All right, our next area is research and development, which you have previously heard referred to as agriculture, food technology, and biotech. These were initially combined into one industry sector, but now they're kind of, you can see, separated into their own areas. You don't see data for some jobs data for some of these areas because it's not available to us, but we will be getting that information in the future. This is an area that our sub-regional hubs have also identified for further exploration, and it was listed in it was named in our Leadership Council meeting. But as we're thinking about ag and food tech as well as biotech, it's really speaking to the intellectual assets we have coming out of our university systems, particularly UC Davis, the asset that we have in something like Aggie Square, and our ability to use this research and development to spin off new business and really be a catalyst and an economic driver in a way that can, even if it's a small amount of jobs, can really multiply additional jobs through those company starts and through some of the secondary services that are that they also spur. So a few examples of businesses include on the next slide. All right, Elevate Labs. So this is skincare, Orca Bio. This is cell therapy, Gemini Bio. This is a manufacturer of cell culture products. So this is all in that biotech space. As we look at the ag and food tech space, Better Meat Co., which is looking at plant-based proteins and the way those are produced, and Syngenta Seeds. So that's crop protection and seed producer for farmers. So really looking at what are the ways that we're innovating around food products and addressing, hunger issues that exist globally and other unique innovation that our region drives. All right, next slide. All right, now we'll talk about precision manufacturing. And for precision manufacturing, we're capturing the areas of semiconductors, mobility, and larger manufacturing services through these three subclusters that are identified here. And you can see here the total number of jobs and quality jobs. And when we think of precision manufacturing in this region, there's a lot of energy going on in the manufacturing space. When we think about next generation transportation, the production of semiconductors. This not only is a significant economic engine for us right now where we've seen some great momentum, it's also an excellent job producer and has the potential to be a major job producer for our region. And to look at some of the businesses that exist now or that are here on the next slide. For semiconductors, this includes Intel, Bosch, which is a new and very promising company for our region, same with Solidigm. In mobility and industrial manufacturing, Siemens, specializing in smart hydraulic solutions, Terzo Power Systems, and engaged in biomanufacturing, the Port. So a lot of potential in this manufacturing space and a big driver of quality jobs for our region. Next slide. All right, within our working lands area, we focus on agriculture, food, and the wood economy. I want to note that our subregions have strongly emphasized these areas. And when we look at share of our economy across our 8-county region, this agriculture and food make up a significant portion of a lot of our rural economies. Agriculture and food often intersect with other clusters as well. So, for example, there could be food transportation and delivery services combined with manufacturing, or food and agriculture as part of the biotech and ag tech industries. Our wood economy encompasses forestry and other uses for wood. And on the next slide, there's actually many businesses that are engaged in this work, but to highlight a couple for you to see what's happening today. In agriculture, we have Pacific Coast Producers involved in growing, canning, and supplying produce. And in forestry, Sierra Pacific Industries. And when we're talking about some of the food and agriculture work, that piece of canning, like the supply chain of agriculture that includes transportation of food, some of the logistics around our food economy are really key aspects of that cluster that speak to higher quality jobs. All right, next slide, please. So lastly, we've heard from multiple members of the Leadership Council that we should conduct a deeper analysis of creative economy and tourism. These are areas that create a lot of vibrancy across the region, but also include really important economic drivers, especially in different parts of our region. So as you can see, our subregional hubs have also identified tourism. And I want to note that we don't have available data on jobs today, but we will be conducting further analysis. And to give you on the next slide an overview of some of the tourism and creative economy areas, there's multiple ways and services to consider. And in tourism, that includes destinations like Tahoe, wine country, the gaming, casinos. When we think of creative economy, that encompasses fields such as media, design, art installation, and music festivals. And particularly in the creative economy, the skills and occupations that go into creative economy can actually speak to a number of different sectors across our region. And so that's something we'd like to put forward for further analysis as well. So with that, before we move any further, I want to open it up for discussion regarding any areas that you feel confident and comfortable with, or if we're missing anything. And I've seen some things come through the chat, but I have not been able to see that, and I'll ask Richard to come off mute and help guide this discussion.
Thanks, Evan. And Adam, I do want to just note that saw I responded to it, but I also got a response from our city's GPS partners that fast saying that they can easily provide you that information or provide the whole leadership council with that information. So we'll be able to break things down pretty actively moving forward. Wanted to
Great, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Just allowing for opportunity for folks to express their interest, confidence, and or questions. And Malachi, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate this list of tradable cluster areas. I think that there is a need to include cannabis in the agricultural and food technology space. I think it would be very important for us to expand our analysis to include cannabis because, one, there are a number of, regardless of the stigmas, there are a number of applications in the bioscience space. This is a very nuanced industry, when it comes to bioscience. The opportunity jobs fit is certainly there. And when it comes to underinvested or disinvested communities, our focus to include cannabis would definitely do a lot in the way of addressing the wealth transfer that we're seeing because there's tremendous inequity in this particular industry. And so I will stop there on cannabis. But I also think separate from cannabis, I'm wondering if there are any problems that would emerge from some cross-pollination in the precision manufacturing space, just because I can see agricultural and food technology perhaps, and then maybe I'm overthinking it, but ag and food has some intersections with manufacturing. I know we're typically talking about semiconductors and other types of hardware, but I'm wondering, if I'm overthinking it or maybe ag and food focus areas would already kind of cover manufacturing. So that's kind of a question that I have, as well as a recommendation, because I'm wondering if from a scoping standpoint, if we would have any particular problems on cross-pollinating precision manufacturing and food and ag. So I will leave it there.
Yeah, thanks, Malachi. Good comments. And it was noted previously that cannabis was mentioned within the Leadership Council discussions over the course of the last couple of meetings. And so it is actually one of the areas, but it falls inside of the ag, food, and biotech area of a cluster. So we're not necessarily honing in on specific industries themselves as much as we are clusters for the crossover. And second piece, and I know we have our city's GPS folks here, and if they want to chime in on any of this, I will say that you are correct around agriculture. We've actually just had this discussion with the Valley Vision team earlier, and about how much crossover there is for agriculture in many of these different sector areas, and precision manufacturing in general tends to have a large crossover in many different sector areas. We're seeing there's subsets of each of them, of each area, of many areas, especially within agriculture. So you're right. You've got agriculture in agriculture, you've got it in ag tech, bio, and you've got it in manufacturing as well. So I think we're needing to do like the interview components of this, remembering we're not singling out, but we are really taking that approach of we need more information, because what we heard from all of you, we need more information in these subcluster areas to be able to hone in a little deeper on some of these components.
Okay, so just a follow-up question then, Richard. I appreciate that. Our research and analysis on ag and food would not necessarily exclude retrieving data or increasing our depth of understanding and potentially, prioritizing cannabis. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, what we'd be looking at is understanding the cluster areas themselves, and cannabis would potentially fall within that, or would fall in that. It's more about us understanding the industry area clusters themselves at this point. So
Okay.
you're correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know there have been some questions that have been coming up in the chat, but I'm going to stay with the hands first. And I know, Krista, you've had yours up, then Adelita, then Troll.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump ahead because it might be coming up, and I was looking some of the exchange between Evan and Rana. So I'm understanding that we're focusing on tradable cluster areas, and as you've mentioned, many of these cluster areas they'll nest in different industry sectors, right? Healthcare, government, whatever. I just want to know even though so much of what it's going to be important, I think it's going to be important for this group to stay focused on, like, are we talking about tradable and what's the benefit, not the benefit, we all know the benefit of tradable versus local serving, but just really helping us keep those two things in mind as we're proceeding, because I don't know that we want to emphasize one while not sort of addressing, I don't want to emphasize tradable and overlook the local, because the local is a huge sector, at least in the Sacramento region, right? Using a government as an example, it's 1 out of every 5 jobs. So that's an industry sector, and these cluster areas, some of them nest inside of that. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there as something I'm not sure if it's jumping ahead, but just want to bring that up.
Appreciate it. So one consideration that we have, and something we're recommending, is that where there is crossover inside the tradable area, you'll see it illuminated inside the further research and analysis. But there's also existing quality jobs in local serving areas, and we recognize that. And so just starting to dive deeper into workforce development opportunities and how to build out opportunities for our residents to enter into those quality jobs is something we have to consider as well. So I think you are jumping slightly ahead, because you're going to see that in our next section, which is existing quality jobs today. Yeah. Adelita.
Hi. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? By the way, I'm on my earbuds, so want to make
We
sure
can
I'm
hear
coming
you.
through.
Yeah.
Okay, great. One area, I know this would probably be a part of ag, and we're talking quality job, but what we're we're not mentioning is like the low quality job. Maybe that, say for instance, farm workers are on the fields and currently right now with heat. I'm thinking about using the art or some kind of technology to improve those situations by utilizing farm workers with that frontline experience and how to improve their situations in that, you know, in the fields, because it's pretty bad when it comes to heat. And for instance, OSHA requires farmers to provide shade for the breaks. But and there's these structures that were invented by someone that are manufactured by welders now, and farmers are required to provide these shade structures. But what I don't see is shade while folks are working, or some kind of mechanism to support farm workers that are in the field. And I'm wondering if there's an area where we can connect, you know, farm workers, art, and technology to create an opportunity for them and their experience, and develop some kind of technology for them to improve their situation during these heat events, or, you know, different weather events that they experience. I don't know if that would fall under, you know, but because it would require creativity. So I think about art, and I also think about the manufacturing of those ideas to generate something that OSHA could adopt to help support workers on the ground and prevent, you know, heat illness and the kinds of things that we're seeing right now. I'm just trying to think creatively about, you know, an opportunity, creating an opportunity for, I don't know, the frontline workers. These are not high quality jobs, but they need to be done. And it requires a creative approach to come up with solutions. And so also I heard something about the canneries, and there's a cannery here in Woodland. I mean, it's old and it's not, it requires a lot of energy to run, how to improve the infrastructure of those buildings to be not so energy intensive, and improve the working conditions for cannery workers. So I think about those frontline workers, improving their situations by including them in idea generation to come up with creative solutions. And I don't know if that falls under a cluster here, but I think it's needed, and it's a way to pull in these workers and generate solutions for them to work together and potentially, you know, address these solutions on a statewide.
No, I appreciate it. One of the things that there's a couple of recognitions here. One is that agriculture is such a large industry for our overarching region. It's also that the job quality isn't always there. Part of the work we'll have, if we are adopting agriculture, is to really hone in on the quality job component of it. And hopefully we'll have some projects emerge with creativity to drive some of that forward. I think right now we're still really in the research analysis phase to understand better some of the pathways that we can all collectively take. But your comment is definitely well taken. Absolutely. I want to move us forward just for time purposes, and Trolls, you had your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, I think from a, economic development practitioner standpoint, these make sense from what we're seeing in our pipeline, with one caveat, and I'll get to that in a second. It's a small one, I promise. And I think the focus on tradable sector jobs is essential for this kind of work. It's the part of the economy we can actually affect at a regional scale, and because it's around how do we attract investment into the region, which drives our local serving sectors, right? So the grocery stores and restaurants and hair salons and all that kind of stuff, they make money because of some of these companies that are hiring people and earning revenue and spending candidly in the community as well. I mean, we see that with Solidigm and Rancho Cordova, for example, where their corporate headquarters located there. Local caterers have seen a huge uptick. They just renovated the Marriott Hotel, that sort of stuff, because the executives are going in there spending money locally in the community. And I think that's something we've already, I mean, if I can take us back a couple of meetings when Merrick and Chad came in and were like, look, we're lagging behind peers in tradable sector employment and tradable sector well, we're not necessarily lagging behind in growth, but we are in employment, and we've got a long gap or a big gap to fill. So I really want to encourage us to focus on the tradable side of the economy as much as we can with this strategy, because anything else I think would be a missed opportunity. I endorse all of these. I'm fine with the structure, and the fact that there's overlap between the industry cluster areas is very normal. I can assure you, there's no such thing as a perfect black and white, kind of like no gray area map of the economy. The one thing I want to just ask is that probably on the precision manufacturing side, that we make an allowance there for non-transportation clean tech and zero emission jobs, things like battery storage, solar technology, that sort of stuff. I know it can probably be shoehorned into the instrumentation, for example, in microelectronics. A company like SMA up in Rockland, 300 people, they do inverters for battery storage and solar, big solar installations. TerraBase out in Davis and Woodland, they do solar. I think that's important to get in here because it's a big circular economy of all kinds. Waste energy work that actually shows up on the working lands as well. I would just encourage us, maybe instead of calling it next generation transportation, call it next generation transportation and energy or something like that. And then I think you're all fine. I think that will cover everything that we're planning to work on for the next few years. And I think that would cover our growth opportunities for the economy going forward.
Girls, I appreciate that. And I will say that we've sort of generated that name based on some of the industry we've seen coming up now and what we have, like what our partners have been talking about. So adjustment to the name to really bring about the full area. I will look to our Valley Vision team, and Evan in particular. I see you most clearly on my screen right now. I think we would be very comfortable in adjusting the name to better capture the full array of opportunities within that sector, that cluster, I should say. Evan, yeah.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
So adding and Charles, just to confirm, it's adding the name the word energy at the end of
Yeah, that's all. We can make, we're economic development folks. We'll take that and bend and spin it 17 ways till Sunday. It just, as long as it says energy, we're good.
Right. Thank you, Charles. Devin.
Hi, Devin Middlebrook, Tahoe region. Just a comment or a question on the working lands category, specifically the wood economy. I know, and I probably should have thought of this and brought it up at previous meetings, but that's how these things go when it's finally laid out in this format. Just thinking if we're being short-sighted of focusing too much on just the wood economy. Obviously, forest health for wildfires is important, and there's a big sector in wood product manufacturing, biomass, cross-laminated timber, all of that. But are we being boxing ourselves in a little too much, not thinking of just conservation economy more broadly? For example, wetland and meadow restoration has huge carbon sequestration benefits, maybe not a pure economic development tool in terms of a product coming out of it, but just in terms of conservation as a whole versus just the wood part of conservation. And I guess my question is, was that part of any of the conversations on the Valley Vision and consultant teams as they were developing that recommendation?
I think working lands in general has been a larger conversation point. I think that we've honed in a little bit on wood economy because of the feedback we've received from folks, but I hear where you're coming from, Devin, and it maybe doesn't push we want to open it up further to see what kind of things lift from conservation economy as well. Evan, I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, these are great comments and capturing some of the nuance that I know is going on in local economies. And I would just say we're carefully logging your really good suggestions and thoughts for further discussion with our team about how to reconcile these ideas. So even if we don't have a definitive answer on it now, we will come back to you with our thoughts on that and how to make those adjustments that are appropriate.
Thank you. Adelita, I see your hand is up, but it may have been up from before. I just wanted to make sure I acknowledged
Oh.
you.
Sorry, yeah, let me lower my hand.
It's okay. Thank you.
And I wanted just, Richard, if I could, because I see Kimberly's question in the chat too, saying, what does this have to do with?
Just about to answer that. Yeah, go for it, Evan.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the city's GPS presentation from a few months back, looking at the gap that we have on high quality jobs in our region, in our 8-county region, which is about 335,000 quality jobs, additional quality jobs that we would need to meet the needs of struggling families in our region. So there's this idea that this project is kind of threefold. We've got creating high quality jobs, and that's what this work is really about, is we identify these tradable sectors. It's acknowledging that we have a gap in the number of high quality jobs that we need, and the only way we can address that and increase our equity outcomes and really address the needs of disinvested communities is to grow the number of jobs that we have across our 8-county region. So that's one, creating jobs. Number two is creating access to high quality jobs. And and I've seen this come up in the chat, we're about to talk about some of our local serving sectors that are really important parts of our economies that we need to make sure there's pathways into those clusters. So that's coming up next, but to talk about how are people getting into these high quality jobs? And then finally, what are we doing to help reduce the barriers? And that's the inclusionary strategies that we're talking about. So our idea is that this like threefold comprehensive action addresses job growth, job access, and barrier reduction. So that's what we're really targeting our strategies towards and asking you to help us move forward on that today.
Devin. Okay, I want to see if there's great comments. Any other comments or items? And Anthony, I see you've got your hand up.
So I jumped in here right after Evan's comments because I think as a newer leadership council member, I'm still trying to understand the evolution. And I think for me, the barrier part, I feel like it needs more of an emphasis. I know we're going to talk about it soon, but I feel like it's so intersectional on all of this, like even how it's designed, that it's hard to lead with these without addressing and thinking about the barriers first, because we could be creating some great jobs that people don't have access to. We could try to alleviate the barriers, but the reality is these grants in each of the subregions aren't like so much that's going to be like totally transformative in a space to address some of these big challenges that have been trying to be worked on for decades. So I'm having a hard time of understanding like how we like what we're missing maybe by not thinking about the barriers up front that could impact the design of even thinking about what these clusters or opportunity areas for new jobs even are. So I almost feel like it needs to be flipped around, like more barrier stuff, then talk about these parts. But maybe we'll get there a little bit later.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, Anthony, and I understand where you're coming from, that when you're thinking about all the really tremendous barriers that people face, it's hard to get into that generative opportunity space first. I guess what I would say is what we're presenting 3 different things today. They're not particularly sequenced. All of these are for further strategy building, further research and action. And they're all absolutely intertwined and necessary to address in order to, in order to address the needs of our disinvested community. So I guess I would ask you to kind of hold what you've heard here, keep listening to the presentation, and then as we move this through, there might be a better sense of how these are intertwining together.
And I'll just add, Anthony, I stand strong with you on this, on your comments. One of the things that's going to happen is that we're going to be using this group to really do further research and analysis, but simultaneously, while the research analysis is happening, we're going to begin working on an equity framework that lifts how to actually do everything you just talked about, right? So we're going to be kind of building this model while we're still looking at more details about these industry clusters. So bear with us for where the inclusion part of inclusionary economic development has to happen for this to be successful.
Merrick, go ahead.
Merrick, are you available?
Oh, I was just gonna respond to that as well, to say there are two other factors since you're newer to this process. One is in ferreting out where the opportunity industries are. A consideration was accessibility of jobs, both for skills-based and some other factors, so that in identifying these areas and further vetting them, the ability to access jobs for people from a wide range of backgrounds and different kinds of experience was an element in kind of narrowing down from the opportunities. And second is that once you get through this into tactics, there's always a dimension of enabling more employment to happen, but also connecting workforce and talent pipelines to the sectors, because those are essential both for employment to grow and to have the inclusive impact. So I think that looking at this, the sort of the criteria by which this was narrowed, in addition to whether we had the right kind of skills mix and we're good at innovation, or there were supply chain relationships, was that accessibility issue. And it concentrates opportunity for a whole wide range of residents. And then again, part of the solution set for both growth and opportunity is the pipeline of reducing barriers to access, ensuring that disconnected populations are engaged through the sector development cluster building strategies. So I think that might help you to orient about where we are right now, how we got there, and a whole bunch of other stuff that will come out of this once those areas are refined or and responded to.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Evan?
No, I was just going to say that was helpful context. Thanks, Merrick.
Okay. Gonna see if there's any additional comments or questions that are coming up for folks. Really great feedback so far. Really great comments. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move us forward to our decision-making process. I do want to make a quote. Right when I did that, Malachi, your hand went up right as I said that.
Yeah, I was trying not to raise my hand. I put my question in the chat box, but I just want to know that does our research identify small business supply chain opportunities within our tradable sectors? I think Merrick made a good point about accessibility of jobs is related to workforce pipeline types of conditions, and sometimes accessibility may be an issue but perhaps, supply chain opportunities, might be there in some of our tradable areas.
And Merrick, if you're available, do you want to comment on that?
Well, one of the things, it's not, I wouldn't say specifically to small business, but one of the things that we did, and maybe Chad, my colleague, can jump onto this, was when we looked at supply chains or value chain relationships within the region, we identified how much of that was captured and what relationships there were among different kinds of firms in the area that supported that sector, even if it wasn't within what we'd call a vertical. I think that what you're raising is both a wealth building access issue and again a tactic about how do we ensure in the growth of the sector that there are opportunities for small and mid-sized firms to participate in the activity that's being generated. And that's also kind of a sector neutral play, which is how do you just ensure that procurement opportunities within a range of major employers or actors in the region are enabling particularly women or people of color owned businesses to maximally participate. So that's kind of a Main Street or entrepreneurship category that may be not sector specific. And I think that that's going to come up in the next conversation. So again, it's kind of like it blends into both of those areas. So, again, this is a tactical play for the first part, and then this is a broader set of opportunities and programs or actions to enable greater participation by those kinds of firms in the procurement opportunities more generally. Is that fair, Richard, Evan, and what I just said? Okay.
It's absolutely. Thank you,
Okay,
Merrick.
so the supply chain opportunities for small businesses, if I'm hearing you accurately, will come up. You said next conversation.
I think there are two ways. One is small business procurement opportunities is not an inherent part of the sector analysis because we don't care whether they're small businesses or mid-sized businesses or large businesses. We care that whatever size business they are, creates a disproportionate concentration of quality jobs that are accessible to a wide range of people. And so the tactic is to ensure that as that sector grows, participation from smaller businesses or in particular, businesses that are owned by women or people of color are able to access those opportunities, but as a sector play, that's not really the factor versus just jobs being created that fit the profile of quality and accessibility. And then in this other section where it's coming up now, it's about wealth building and economic mobility that are not necessarily tied to an individual sector. And that's a broader set of opportunities and procurement and for small businesses probably is one of those areas of opportunity to focus on.
Merrick, I jump in real quick just to add on one note, which is that while we did not include business sizes or numbers of small businesses as part of the criteria for identifying these clusters, we did corral that information and data. And it's part of what Cities GPS presented at the April 25th Leadership Council meeting. And so we do have those data available about the number of businesses in each of these clusters. Overall, in all of the priority clusters that we identified, we found over 13,000 businesses in the region and over 1,000 businesses in almost every one of the priority clusters that we've talked about today. Obviously, not all of those are going to be large businesses. Most of them are going to be small and mid-sized firms. So we did that analysis not to screen these options that we have for priority clusters, but just to make sure that we were talking about, some critical mass of large, mid-size, and small companies that could be a part of each of these clusters. But like Merrick and others have said so far, identifying what those small business opportunities will be is part of the strategy development.
Okay. Okay, that's very helpful. My concern is that one, and as we look at the disaggregated data around, the size of businesses, um, if we will, if we will be able to kind of see, where opportunities live, within each of our priority clusters. And then, I'm also concerned, about, where disinvested communities fit within these priority clusters, um, not just from the job creation standpoint, but also from the wealth building standpoint. Because BIPOC entrepreneurs, have, just, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but just this great unlevel playing field that we have to pay attention to. And I am concerned that the measure that we're using is only in the jobs and not necessarily the entrepreneurship space.
We focus on jobs because it's how over 85% of people who work in the economy earn their living, which is as a wage or salary worker. And so we think it's a really, really important measure. Also, even for people who don't work as a wage or salary worker, if we can identify that an industry provides a critical mass or a concentration of job quality for workers in that industry, there's a very strong probability that job quality will translate to wealth building for small business owners and sole proprietors in those industries as well. So it's a nice thing for us to be able to focus on, not just for workers, people who have wage and salary jobs, but also for people who are trying to make a living being an entrepreneur in one of these industries. As far as access goes, we have so much data, it's hard to fit them all into these leadership council meetings, but we have data on the proximity of these businesses and jobs to struggling workers who are struggling to make ends meet for their family. We also have data on the accessibility of these jobs from a skills access perspective. So how qualified are struggling workers for quality jobs in these industries? And both show that it's pretty neutral, that struggling workers are no farther away from these jobs than they are from any other type of job, and they're just about as qualified for jobs in these priority clusters as they are for jobs in the economy more generally. So we've done quite a bit of number crunching to make sure that we are hitting these targets for not only growing a more prosperous economy, but growing a more inclusive economy as well that will serve the disadvantaged communities that CJF is intended to target.
But I would just, the last thing I'd just add on to that is, the numbers aren't everything, and that's why endorsing the direction this is taking, the qualitative input from employers, from intermediaries representing workers, and better understanding where the opportunity is and what the strategies and tactics could be. This would, I think the next step here that folks are asking is approval from you all that this makes sense, that you raise issues that need to be taken into consideration in the qualitative refinement and leading to strategy choices. And so I think that's what you're saying is not inconsistent with all that, but I just want to highlight that we don't have all the answers here through numbers or the preliminary qualitative. It's more like endorsing a bounded set of a bounded set of opportunities to either refine or validate, refine, or dismiss, because once we interact with more investors and employers and others, that it may prove out that certain things don't actually make sense. So this is not a it's not a decisive moment. It is a decision moment, but a not decisive moment on defining what these opportunity areas are.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. You know, again, my concern is that, you know, is that we have some of the um, access issues, if you will, workforce pipeline, you know, access issues, kind of on the radar, and as well as our entrepreneurship opportunities on the radar. And you know,
Yeah.
although a majority of the of the ROI is, you know, that we're seeing, or that we're uh f- um that we're focused on is in the workforce space, you know, those who were actually employed for a company. I think that it's important to be, um you know, I think it's important for us to have on the radar that, you know, although a majority of the workforce, um uh or a majority of what we're looking at, and in terms of return on investment, and you know, hitting our targets, is workforce related, that, you know, knowing what that workforce looks like, you know, is important for how we develop strategies that hit, and have a meaningful impact on BIPOC communities.
Yep. I think we're actually in
Malachi,
sync.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Malachi, I think we're all in 100% agreement. I think we're still trying to work through the strategy components of this to figure out some of the pieces that you're talking about right now. And I would like to recommend that two things occur. One is that we have a further conversation, so we can build out some of these strategies, uh, and bring them and start to include them in deeper. Also, that when you start looking at the equity framework pieces, there's places where we can build this in more intensively. So I'm
Got
But
it.
Malachi, I
appreciate
think,
you bringing it up.
yeah, I think what you're saying is the exact next step. I mean, this is really
Yeah.
to define the what based on a set of criteria that looks at high quality jobs that could be accessible to communities across our region. And then next is the how, you know, how we really are building those strategies out in a way that that is accessible, and some of those methods, you know, including supporting BIPOC entrepreneurialism, could very well be like you know, a viable strategy. I just don't think we're quite there yet because we're still fleshing out what these opportunities look like.
Got it. And I'm navigating through the process here. So,
Thank you.
but this is a
So are
helpful
we. All good.
this is a helpful conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to move us forward to the decision-making process now. I do want to note thank you. There are two people who are, couple actually, leadership council members who are in the attendee room. You have to accept the invitation to be a panelist. So you can join us all over here on this side. We'll be able to see you then, and your vote will be counted in the chat. So Gretchen, I think, is gonna send you another invite. So please accept to be a panelist. I know it's new for all of us on this one. Isa did a wonderful job of going through the consensus model when she had you do the last vote. We are going to use the chat. I am going to start with oppose and then move our ways from oppose to can live with, support, and abstain, just in the same fashion that Isa did. So on this, if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Any opposed to selecting the clusters that are listed here on this page to move forward on? Tex, you're already one step ahead. How about any can live with? I'll give folks a chance to type in. And we'll move to support as well. Those who support the movement forward. Yes, with the comments made today. This is also a time where you can indicate your abstention if you want to abstain from the vote. Okay. Any other? Thank you, James. Any other votes that need to come in? Thank you, Jenny. All right. Feel free to jump. If you're still getting to your chat, feel free to enter it in. Congratulations. We are moving forward on this set of areas. Again, this is not a finalization. This is actually enabling us to gather more information and data. So really excited to take our next step collectively. Evan, I'm going to pass it back over to you for the next step, for the next component.
Great. All right. Well, that's great progress. Really appreciate everybody, everybody's patience in working through that vote and that consideration. That's a great move forward for us in terms of working with these tradable clusters and advancing some key strategies there. So I'm really looking forward to that. I heard it raised both in the chat and people voicing this that there's other components of our economy that are really important. And that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about connecting to quality jobs. So, and just to kind of go back to those three anchoring things, creating jobs, that's what we just talked about. That's what you do in your tradable clusters, connecting to quality jobs, and that can happen throughout any of our sectors. But right now we're going to focus more on what's come through with some of our local sector jobs that have a high number of high quality jobs and also make up a large component of our economy and are therefore really important for people in terms of thinking about all of our communities being able to access high quality jobs. And then the last one will be the barrier reduction, which we'll talk about after this. So let's go on to our next slide. So as I've previously mentioned, we've heard from our community partners about the crucial component of We Prosper Together should be the ability for residents to obtain a high quality job. Super important part of this component. So while our goal is to develop a model for disadvantaged community residents to secure quality jobs in various industries, building these industries to a sufficient level will take time. So today we're examining the current availability of quality jobs. This analysis will help us identify workforce development models. And I know that's really important to you all and important as we think about strategy building that can assist our residents in transitioning to these positions. So we've reached this point through a process that involved using data from City's GPS data book, which identified the number of available jobs. And our sub-region hubs also engaged in discussions with community residents about industries they're comfortable exploring today. Additionally, our collective conversations with you has emphasized the importance of not overlooking these local job opportunities that are available now. So in making this decision today, this will guide us in conducting additional research to determine pathway opportunities through workforce development and to identify the industries and partners already engaged in this work within the region. Ultimately, we don't want to reinvent any efforts that are already underway. Instead, we aim to enhance the existing initiatives through the We Prosper Together initiative. We can go to the next slide. Actually, sorry, let's go back one. I took us too fast. So when we conducted an analysis using the data and subregion findings, we found that 2 areas rose to the top: healthcare and construction. This doesn't mean there aren't quality jobs in other areas or that they should be ignored, but healthcare and construction present a good starting place for We Prosper Together. So working with our contracted subregional partners, they gathered community outreach and input, including the discussions we all had on May 16th, to identify where our communities feel comfortable. And I want to note that hospitality and tourism also received recommendations. But you'll see why we're prioritizing healthcare and construction for further research. So let's go to the next slide. So as we look at these clusters, what are we going to be doing with additional research? A big piece of this is looking more deeply at what are the pathway opportunities within the workforce development system. So really looking at what are those strategies that can help create access points for these high quality jobs. And then identifying where there's currently activity going on, addressing workforce challenges and looking for gaps and looking for areas to really enhance and support the work that's occurring. So next slide, please. So you can see here the number of subregional hubs that have identified these sectors as really key components of the subregional economy. And so this includes the feedback from the partner, the community outreach and input. And you all heard about some of these sectors in the presentations on May 16th. Let's go to the next slide. And here we've quantified the available quality jobs where it was available. And you see healthcare and construction up top again, where we're looking at not only the share of the economy itself, but the number of quality jobs that exist within these sectors. So really looking at these high growth areas with a high number of quality jobs and thinking through access points for our disinvested communities and diverse populations. And I'm seeing Paul's question, the nonprofit sector was considered, I think, in community services.
It loosely fits into community services. Community services also kind of doubles up a little bit for folks that would be within the county department supporting food services or health benefits, etc. So it kind of doubles up a little bit.
Yeah, so you can see from this analysis, healthcare and construction emerged at the forefront again. So we looked at kind of where it was identified as a key priority within our subregional sectors, or within our subregional hubs, and healthcare and construction rose to the top. And then when we looked at number of quality jobs, that was the case as well. So each of these industry represents over 50% of the total number of quality jobs available. And it's important to note, while these industries currently lead in job availability according to city's GPS data, other industries may also grow in the future. But for now, we're recommending a focus on healthcare and construction due to their substantial number of quality job opportunities. So I'm going to pause there and provide some space for questions and comments. And I see already William Walker asking why no data on government. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if somebody else does.
I would ask see if our city's GPS folks could help us with that. When we initially were doing the data analysis piece, I believe that the government sector was falling within the local serving and was not something that we were tracking at the time. And that's why this is coming off of the old data book. But Merrick or Chad, if you wanted to jump in, feel free to.
Sure, Richard. So we do have data on number of jobs and number of quality jobs and the share of jobs that are quality jobs for government. They're in a different data book. They're or a different section of the data book than the clusters section, which is probably why the team didn't find them when you were looking for them. But those are in the opportunity jobs section of the data book where things are broken down by sector of the economy rather than cluster. I can point you all to that in the chat.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that. Volma?
Hi, thank you. I may have missed it, but the energy industry, is there not I guess, I mean, I'm not seeing it here at all, or is it included in utilities somehow?
Would it,
The energy,
yeah.
the energy industry, like and I guess I'm speaking specifically towards electrification and so on. But I'm not sure, like, because a lot of the job doesn't yet exist, or we're just talking about like available jobs as of now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to answer, Volma, is that this is available jobs today, not available, like not proposed future jobs that we know of. In the utilities world, that's really falling within the public utilities section. So SMUD and et cetera for available quality jobs today.
Got it.
Yeah. And William, and I just want to note, Anthony, I do see your question. We'll come back to that. William?
So would SMUD fall under utilities or government?
Utilities, I believe.
Okay.
So Anthony, the start point is to in relation to your question in the chat about how we would do a little deeper analysis of methods to make sure we're really connecting with disadvantaged communities. We would start with collectively connecting with the different work development institutions or groups out there. So around job training, around job readiness. And there are multiple folks doing this work, but not necessarily all fully connected to the degree that we need to be. Within that range, then, it's also about what would be the intentional connection, outreach, and building of a methodology, a model to be able to move folks from not from, but within disadvantaged communities into opportunities to be able to access the training and or the work development opportunities. So there has to be this is about us doing analysis around developing a model, not necessarily we're going to run out and do this tomorrow kind of thing. I see head nodding, so I feel like I captured enough of it there. Other questions, Malachi?
Yes. Healthcare and construction make a ton of sense in terms of, where they're standing on the top, or certainly from the standpoint of, recommendations that came in from the always forget the term for our community partners. This is Civic Thread and all of those guys. What do we call them?
Our contracted community partners. Yeah, that
Community
works.
partners. Okay. So, but maybe I missed something, or maybe I'm mixing things up. So there's the research and analysis on our tradable clusters, and then there's this particular data right here, but I don't see the tradable not all of the tradable clusters are on here. Like, for example, precision manufacturing. Am I mixing things up, or this is just kind of like a different snapshot that we're focused on here?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are looking at, in this case, the current available quality jobs by industry. That can include local serving and tradable. As the tradable industry, as we help to grow the tradable industry sector, more quality jobs will become available there. But today we see some of our highest numbers in healthcare, construction, and other places, not necessarily in the tradable job areas yet. That will change over time, we believe, as we grow the tradable industry areas. But we're starting with what is existing today, because we've heard really loud and clear from our community partners that we need to support people in getting into jobs today while waiting for other quality jobs to emerge.
Okay, so we don't necessarily have available quality jobs data currently in, for example, precision manufacturing.
We have the data. We don't necessarily have the volume of quality jobs at this stage.
Got it. You're looking at what rose to the top, basically. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
And again, just for folks to remember, this isn't about us selecting or stopping with, because Malachi's comment is important. It's not about us stopping with healthcare and construction. It's about us starting here because this is where available quality jobs are today. Any other questions or comments in this area? Gretchen or Connor, can you move us forward in the slides? Thank you. Okay, we're going to go through the vote process since I haven't heard any other questions or comments. We're asking for you to go through the process around selecting the two areas that exist there at healthcare and construction. We can broaden that as we go over with time, but this is our start point. So in the chat, and I was reminded by one of my colleagues, please, when you put your info in the chat, if you could address it to everyone, that would be great. Anyone who opposes? I'll give a second. Not seeing anything. Anyone who can live with it? I'm still not seeing anything. Those who support? And thank you. While everyone's putting the support in, any abstentions as well, please. I think we've pretty much hit max there. All right, we've got our first two to start with. We will be expanding over time, and as Malachi's comment was made, this is a start point for us to really begin to develop this process. Also, we are going to be growing our economy, ideally, with tradable industry, and we're going to need to really expand it. Plus, you'll see this local industry area grow as well as our tradable industries grow with it. Let's move forward. Evan, do you want to kick us off on this just to start it, and then I will jump in from here? Your name's on here, by the way.
Well, this is the third pillar that we've been talking about, so appreciate the walkthrough so far. So we've approved where we're moving forward with our job creation and tradable sectors. We've approved now where we're going to focus on some of the existing sectors and accessible jobs in healthcare and construction. And now we're going to talk about really barrier reduction and how we want to start thinking about strategies that help foster inclusion. So I'll turn it over to Richard to talk about that in more detail.
Thanks, Evan. If we go to the next slide, please. So it's in essence what we have talked a lot today about the necessity for inclusionary strategies. The reality is that an inclusive economy has to have inclusionary strategies. It's the methodology of breaking down the barriers and forming an equitable framework so that we can make sure that all communities are able to access opportunities to the points that lifted today. That falls in line with obtaining jobs, with being able to participate in the growing economy. That might also be with small business development and growth and entrepreneurism. And we really want to establish a model and a plan for how it is our full region can participate, including our disadvantaged communities and those who have historically been left behind. In doing so, we also know that there are areas that we have control over, we don't have control over, but we have to consider the model in which we are framing this. As we are building this together collectively, one of the most important components of this is for the collective voice to be engaged. So one thing I will be putting out, and I'm just going to ask you to sit with this in the back of your head, is that as we move through the inclusionary strategies component and we begin developing an equity framework, we're going to be bringing this equity framework back to all of you for further review and analysis. We also would like to have an ad hoc committee of members of the Leadership Council who can help us in formalizing the direction of this work. So I will not ask yet for your engagement in that, but I do want to have you sitting and thinking about your possibility of engaging over the next month to support us in this growth. So many of you have done this work so intensively, and your voices would be really valued in it. So as we are really considering this model, I will say our sub-region hubs, our community partners, really lifted several areas along with data that came about from Cities GPS that lifted the 5 areas you see here: workforce development, childcare, transportation, housing, and outreach and awareness. That's the connective point component for us to really consider as a starting point for our equity framework. Next slide, please. And here you see a listing of these 5 areas, which you can see were heavily called out by our sub-region hubs as really areas that really need to be addressed immediately. You can see the other 3 areas that were also lifted up, and where data was available by individual, you'll see it by individual in terms of annual cost. That may be more expensive, less expensive in your area. I certainly recognize that, but that's a medium level. What we really noted was just a high level. Everyone talked about the workforce development component, job access piece. But then we saw childcare, transportation, housing, very much called out by 4 of our 5 sub-region hub areas. This is out of 5. And then just the awareness of opportunities and how to engage was really called out as well. There are other aspects to this, and we recognize it. Some of it can be lifted inside of these other areas, but we see these all as being very much important. Labor. We actually have heard from all of you tremendously about the absolute value of having this be included and be a part of our work. And if we don't figure out how to actually build the inclusionary components of this work, we're going to struggle in being successful. I'm going to move to the next slide, which Anthony will give you a chance to raise your hand and go for it.
Well, thank you. I know I'll do the step up, step down. I've kind of asked a question in each one, but I'm trying to just orient myself here. But hopefully my question is kind of quick. But did these evolve in the first round of the health council, in the leadership council meetings, or were these recommendations from City DPS or Community Strong? How did these 5 emerge? And then I'm curious if one of the inclusionary strategies that I would propose that we recommend is that we're like race explicit in this work. I don't know if that's thinking about it in the same way, but I'm trying to think about what the total dollar amount to each subregion would be, and thinking about impact. I feel like we do have to be really, really targeted and focused. And I feel like some of the other conversations that we have haven't really been about demographic or clear on, who exactly these investments are going to go to. And so I wonder if we need to elevate that our strategy has to be race explicit in the way that it is designed and move forward.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, when we dive into each of these areas, we have to call out the populations that have been intentionally left behind in many ways, and also policy-wise haven't had the same opportunities. And I think race falls into that category as well, Anthony. So, but we have to start with some sections, some category areas that we can build on. And I think that then we have your topics that you just mentioned built inside of each of those areas would be my recommendation. Does that hit your comments? I want to make sure I touched on that.
It does, but I almost feel like if you're not race explicit and kind of putting it with the same importance of anything else that we talk about and get more visibility and airtime, that it can get lost and lost and lost. I hear that we will get to it. I hear, like, to Malachi's comments, we'll understand and do further data, but I feel like if we're leading in equity, we have to have all this like front loaded more so that we understand it and are like grounded in it when we're making every single decision along the way. If not, it does feel like it's kind of a secondary priority.
Claire. Alyssa, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, I don't know what is included in the outreach and awareness, but I want to make sure that we are specifically providing awareness and education opportunities to the employers, because far too long, there have been, many initiatives where we talk about the disinvested, the disenfranchised, and marginalized. And if our employers don't see it, if they don't hear it, if they don't understand it, you can get them into jobs and into situations where they may feel like it's an advancement. The employee may be there and the employer is dismissive, is discriminatory, is not doing their part to ensure that the people who are now employed are going to be thriving in that position. So I don't know if that's part of the awareness for the employers also, but they absolutely have to be mindful of the challenges that people of color and other marginalized communities have faced over the years and why it's necessary to do this work.
A really great comment. I think it is now, right? Thank you for bringing that up. I also recognize Anthony, I didn't fully answer the second part to your question, which was the how we got here piece. Cities GPS did provide us with data around specific areas, things that you could analyze a cost analysis around: childcare, transportation, housing, for example. Simultaneously with our subregion hubs, they did a lot of community outreach and community meetings, and did their own interview process to determine the barriers that folks were facing on the ground level when it came to either obtaining or maintaining employment, quality job employment. And these areas were what rose to the top. when we combine them within looking at the data analysis, that's where these are the 5 areas that have sat at the top from the beginning. There are some that, for example, workforce development, outreach, and awareness that our sub-region hubs added to the list as we moved forward.
Thanks.
Any appreciate your comments so far. Any other comments, questions? I want to move us to a vote if there aren't any other areas. If we could go to the next slide. I'm going to go through the process here. And again, I'm also gonna, after this, we're gonna be sending out an email and asking for folks to join our ad hoc committee so that we can continue to get your excellent advice and information and direction on how we lift these items into an equity framework. Anyone who opposes? Anthony, could you provide a little more detail about the opposition?
I feel like we're designing like the skeleton or like the umbrella that's going to capture a lot of work that feeds into it. And it feels like it's hard for me to trust that the umbrella right now is designed in such a way that will meet the needs. And so I feel like this framework needs a little bit more on what exactly an inclusionary strategy is, how these things are designed in a way that equity kind of builds into it, as opposed to where it sits right now. It looks like they're just more topic areas that are that live without, you know, that umbrella. I know that We Prosper Together has an equity lens like throughout it, and I appreciate you all kind of bringing it back up. But I feel like if it's not documented and designed in such a way where it's really clear, I just have less confidence that it's gonna produce the outcomes that we're trying to create. So at this point, I don't feel confident in it, but that's just where I'm sitting right now.
Does it make you feel more aligned or can live with it if these are the 5 starting areas, which is what we'd be asking for us to actually take that deeper dive? And then as we take that deeper dive, which you have referred to, then come back to the Leadership Council, continue to refine this and build out more areas as necessary. But really we're looking at the topic areas to have that deeper dive into. This is step 1 in what would be much longer process.
I can maybe live with that one. I don't want to hold down a process. I know there's a timeline. So I can live with that strategy. If we can kind of balance it that way, that'd be helpful to me. Thank you.
Yeah, and simultaneously, thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that. Simultaneously, Paul, that's kind of clarifying what it is you're voting on, which is what topic areas we are going to start with to really take that deeper dive into building this equity framework. On that note, thank you, Anthony. Any opposition at this point now? And can live with? Thank you, William. You're jumping ahead. The other can live with? Thank you. And you can continue to say can live with those who support as well, please. And any abstentions simultaneously. Okay. Still see some folks chiming in. At this stage, I think we have continue to please to enter in your support can live with, abstentions. Just want to say out loud how challenging these three items are to move forward on. Anytime we are hitting a decision-making point, it always feels as though we might be leaving something out because we are making a step forward. And naturally, when you do that, there's so many components that go into it that it is often like leaving something behind. Yet simultaneously, in this case, what I want to just lift that We Prosper Together is doing what I've seen Valley Vision so intentionally do is do this within steps of we continue to analyze, dive deeper, and really break out the strategies within each section. Each time there's another round of opportunity for us to expand our knowledge. So appreciate all of you very much. I'm going to move us forward to the next slide. And I don't know that we have anyone from the public that's here, but if we do, I want to give them a chance to. And Gretchen or Connor, you can let me know if we have anybody else who wants to speak.
We do have one member of the public here. And if they would like to make a comment, they can raise their hand and I'll give them speaking.
Yeah. Gretchen, I can't see them. Can you let me know if they raise their hand?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay. Thanks. We'll move us forward for right now. Evan, I'm going to pass it back over to you and you can move us forward.
Okay, we're getting towards the end of our meeting. Thank you, Richard, and thanks everybody for that really thoughtful discussion. And let's look at the next slide. Yeah, I wanted to highlight some upcoming events, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So we have an all collaborative meeting for We Prosper Together coming up next week. That's going to be from 2 to 4. It's going to be a virtual meeting. And it is giving our sub-regional partners, those are our community partners who have conducted engagement, doing a lot of this on the ground work, give them an opportunity to share some of the findings that they've had from their engagement and some of their recommendations, which many of you saw at the May 16th meeting. But this is an opportunity to share that more widely. So we're looking forward to being able to do that and to have an opportunity to connect with the large collaborative. Also, exciting announcement, the California Economic Summit, which is hosted by California Forward, is going to be occurring in Sacramento this year. And this is exciting for us. First of all, the last time it was in Sacramento, and the Sacramento region was back in 2016. It travels around the state. It's typically an event where about 1,000 people gather from around the state to cast a vision and to engage a lot of our policy leads from the state. The governor frequently speaks at this event. And it really, through the work of the work groups and the conference participants as a whole, create a really interactive experience to shape policy priorities and programmatic priorities, and an opportunity to really uplift the issues of our region. So we have a close partnership with California Forward as members of the California Stewardship Network, which is a network that they kind of backbone. So we're going to have an opportunity to help shape what some of the site visits are, what some of the program is. And California Forward is really committed to be aligned with We Prosper Together. And we've already started those conversations about how we ensure, for example, this is really a focus on our whole 8-county region in a way that aligns with We Prosper Together. And what are the ways that we're going to have an opportunities to uplift both the strategies and the issues that we're seeing across our community in order to share that with other regions and help shape a California policy agenda. So I'm really excited about that. Please mark your calendars, check out the California Forward website, and that'll be coming soon. And you can check out other events going on using that QR code. And let's see, is there another slide? I don't think so. Okay. Well, I will wrap us up. I will just really give a very heartfelt thank you to all of you for your participation today. I know it takes some patience to move through these topics, but we have a great platform for moving forward. Our team has really been looking forward to this opportunity where we can start to narrow in on a few things and really start getting into this this strategy building, which I think is going to be a a very exciting part of this initiative and really get us towards this regional roadmap towards creating that RFP where we'll be turning money around for the Catalyst Fund. All of this is the building blocks for us to be able to do that and really start implementing the work. So the thoughtful engagement and feedback from all of you gives me a lot of confidence in how we're moving forward. I do know that we are talking about a skeleton of activities right now, but it's a starting point for us. Having gone through a lot of data analysis, a lot of community engagement, it's a very exciting moment to be able to move this forward with all of you. And I feel really, I have a lot of trust in all of you to continue to bring up all the relevant topics and all the things that we need to be mindful of and to continue in this work together that represents our communities, our geographies, and our region. So thank you so much and looking forward to our next time together.